First of all, introducing our challenger.
Out of the blue corner.
He's going to step in and he does. It's all over.
Let's bring on the boom.
This is Eternal MMA.
All right, everybody, we are back for the Eternal Insiders Podcast here in the year of 2024. I'm joined once again by Darryl Martin, here to talk about the fights that were, here to talk about the big year that was 2023 for Eternal MMA, for Australian MMA as a whole, and all the cards we had for Eternal MMA. What a year it was indeed. Some massive fights. We've got some awards that we want to talk about. Fighter of the Year. We had Fighter of the Year, Submission of the Year, Breakthrough Fighter of the Year. We'll have a little bit of a look ahead to what's to come in 2024. But first, we're going to have a little bit of a look back at 2023 and talk about all the good things that came out of that. There was a lot of good things. Saw a few videos from myself and Darryl breaking down a few cards. There was a lot to break down. So many good fights right across the board. From all the main card fights that we had through the prelims, it was another absolute epic banner year for Eternal MMA, and we're here to talk about some of those things. But first, please welcome back in Darryl Martin here to join me again. Darryl, it's been a couple of months we've talked, man. How was everything for you? How was your Christmas? How was your end of New Year? How are you doing?
And everything's been good. I've been a little bit deprived of some MMA. All the UFC cards have stopped. I think we're back. Is it next week? Where is Strickland and Duplessis? Is it next week? Week after?
We're a couple of weeks away from that. We've got another card coming up this week, which is Tom Nolan coming up on one of the Apex cards, which we are going to talk about Tom Nolan, former Eternal MMA boy. But yes, we are back, but Strickland is a couple of weeks away, so we're not to be deprived for much longer,
So,
mate.
yeah, no Eternal, no UFC. It's been a slow old Christmas, slow break.
It has been a slow break. Did you get to enjoy yourself, though? Did you get to chill out a little bit, unwind?
It's good. I spent a bit of time sort of skipping around, seeing a few people, seeing some of the gyms up here in Brisbane, sort of talking to some of the gyms about what sort of moves they're making this year in the MMA scene up here. And there's been a bit of movement in terms of coaches and fighters and things like that, stuff that we'll, talk about sort of as it becomes more prevalent to Eternal as these fighters enter the fray and stuff. We've seen some gyms gain new coaches. Where was I the other day? Corporate Box in the Valley have now got former UFC fighter, former UFC top 10, Ben Ewan has joined the Corporate Box Valley over there. So they've got Glenn Hodgins. He's leading up their kickboxing. Everyone knows Glenn up here in Brisbane. He's probably one of the most animated cornermen you'll ever see. He's a great coach, and he's a competitor himself. But they've also got themselves a couple of new jiu-jitsu coaches, and obviously getting Ben Ewan down there is a massive move for them. And a gym that's kind of been a predominantly kickboxing gym have now really made the moves to push out into, they've had MMA guys training there. Victor goes and does a little bit with Glenn and stuff down there. And it's not like they're brand new to MMA, but obviously getting Ben Ewan in there and getting a couple of new jiu-jitsu coaches in there, that's going to drag some people into that gym. And obviously they've made these moves because they want to push in further into MMA. And I'm looking forward to what they're sort of doing this year. I went down and had a look at the new facility for Southside MMA. They've got themselves a brand new facility down there.
Fantastic.
Beautiful facility, fantastic facility down there for Pasha Stolya and the boys down there. So new facility, new equipment, new everything. And I think they're sort of looking forward to this year as a sort of a bit of a rebranding year where they sort of find their feet again and push into that MMA space. And they've got some good amateur guys down there, and now they've got the right people on the right seats of the bus. They've got they're getting their stand up together. They've obviously got their jiu-jitsus, like they're a really strong part of their curriculum, and they've got they've had MMA there for a long time. But I think they're just again a bit of moving of the coaches and stuff, and a bit of a shifting to get everything working seamlessly in there. So that sort of moves taken place. Went down to TFC. Their team seem to be growing every time I go down there, there seems to be more people there, more people are part of their MMA class. And they've got Chelsea Hackett, she's fighting in PFL. They've got obviously Benny Johnson's going to fight for the strap in Eternal. They've got a bunch of guys who are amateurs who are coming up. Plus they've got obviously Diego Pereira. They've got a bunch of guys. Nick Kepu is, I think he's coming up for a fight as well. So they've got, they're sort of been pretty solid, but they've been adding to that team over the break. And again, they've added Uncle Des. He's, been down there for a little bit now, Des Mayer. But, he's sort of been there long enough now. You've got Nakia, you've got all those guys. And I guess everyone's sort of settled in down there now. People from, I guess, connections they had previously, those people have now come back to coaches that they know and feel comfortable underneath. So there's a bit of shifting in that space. But yeah, I'm going to try and spend a bit of time, get up. I want to go and see Adrian Pang and the guys up at Integrated, sort of see where they're moving to, what they're doing. I mean, they've always had a solid coaching staff, and obviously having Adrian at the helm is pretty handy. But there's this, obviously CMBT, I need to get down there and see Mumford and all those guys. He's been, chewing my ear off about this White Lightning guy. So, there's a really big push, I think, like obviously over COVID, there was a bit of a lull. Things went a bit flat. But I think now that COVID's over, I think everyone sees the light at the end of the tunnel, and everybody's willing to put in a bit more money, expand their gyms, pay for coaching staff. And, we're starting to see these gyms, were always good gyms, but they're really making moves to be better gyms and try to solidify themselves as the best gym, as well as being, great fighters, but also best gym. Everybody sort of wants that title, right?
And I mean, you've been sort of around this game for so long, man. I mean, combat sports in large. I mean, when you're sort of getting into these gyms now, like, what are you sort of seeing from like a growth perspective when you talk about, I guess, what Australian MMA was like sort of 10 years ago, based on what you're sort of seeing now in terms of numbers, in terms of talent, in terms of people coming through, coaches, accessibility, equipment, resources, that sort of thing. Like, you getting into these gyms and seeing all this sort of stuff, like, are you noticing like, like much bigger things happening, coming into 2024 compared to what we were sort of looking at 10 years ago? Like, what's that shift like? How big are we talking?
Look, the shift is, there's not a number I can put on it. It's not 10x, it's not 100x, like it's 1,000x. It's the amount of people that are interested, the resources. Like when you go to these gyms now, like if you go down and see the surface area of TFC, how big that gym is, how big the mat space, the amount of bags, a full-size cage, a full-size ring. You go to Integrated, they've got cages, rings. You go to Southside, CMBT, Shindo, all these gyms. I mean, Shindo's, been around forever. They've got a pretty good model down there with Kerry and stuff. In terms of their size, hasn't really changed, but they've really refined their program down there. And I think in all these gyms, every year they just get smarter about the way they train. Gone are the days of, okay, I'll do jiu-jitsu Monday, kickboxing Tuesday, I'll have Wednesday off, I'll do something Thursday and sparring Friday. Those days are gone. These guys are training 5-6 days a week. They're doing professional weight cuts. They're spending time with, I think, I can't remember his name, my bad. The fight dietitian, Jordan Sullivan. So people are spending time to really, really look into their nutrition side of the profile. Guys are starting to look into strength and conditioning coaches. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people taking this not as a hobby anymore, not as hey, I just want to be the best guy in Queensland. I want to be the best in Australia, and I want a shot at some of these world fighters, some of the guys in the UFC or ONE FC or whatever wherever they sort of mature to outside of Australia. And it's amazing to go and have a look in these gyms and see the quality of fighters and just the quantity of quality fighters that are around. Back in the day, we always had really standout guys, obviously, Adrian Pang really stood out. We had, Ben Ewan, he really stood out. There were these guys who really stood out, Reese McLaren, all these guys, because they were sort of like that one guy in the division that really stood out. Now, like, we're seeing belts change hands. We're seeing standout performances. We're seeing, there's this skill level. We had that guy from the American guy, the wrestler, what's his name, came from Thailand, fought.
The fought for the lightweight championship. Brett Pastor.
Brett Pastor. Like that guy's, he's a world champion. He's a Div 1 wrestler. He's a catch wrestling champion. He's a jiu-jitsu guy. He came out here and our guy beat him pillar to post.
Quite dramatically.
And again, it's like, when I sit there, I look at that, it's a happy thing to see, like, hey, back in the day, that would have been almost the death, it would have been such a bad fight for an Australian guy, that level of wrestling, that level of all those skills, that amount of boxing, kickboxing. It would have been tough for 99% of Australian fighters. And now you come out here and our guy ran through him, put a clinic on, beat him in all facets of the fight. And I think it's a testament to how good MMA is getting in Australia, how good these gyms are. Like when I go down and I see these guys training, now, the structure of the camps, the structure of the training sessions is more intelligent. It's more intense. It's just more structured. And like I said, there's no more of this. Like, and I've been to a lot of these different gyms, and they all run, like, within reason, pretty similar. If you're not turning up to training, and I'm talking about your 5 days a week, well, we're not going to have you fight. You're not fighting. Back in the day, if you made 3 days, yeah, you could fight. Who cares? Turn up and have a go.
I'm just happy to have you turn up.
Yeah, just happy to have you turn up. Yeah. Who cares? Close enough. But now, like I said, this guy's literally, hey, if you don't turn up all 5 days, well, you're not fighting. We're not going to have you fighting. And that ability to be able to say that, because you've got so many guys, hey, we'll just swap you out and put someone else in. If you're not going to do the time with everybody else and with your team, we'll just swap you out. Before, that wasn't really a thing because we just didn't have the volume of fighters to do that. So you almost had to just, okay, look, if you can make it 3 days, you can. Yeah. Now there's an expectation, not just for yourself, but for your teammates to turn up.
And I mean, I think we see that play out. I mean, you just talked about, like the top of the card, someone like Quillan Salkill, getting the job done that he did over a guy like Brett Pastor with all the accolades and experience and everything he has. But I mean, you watched just as much, if not more. I mean, of the Eternal cards that we had last year, I can't think of any card that we had. I mean, not just from the main fights that we had on UFC Fight Pass, but I mean, how good were all the fights like underneath that? I mean, typically speaking, the prelims were a lot of the amateur guys coming through. But I mean, even that level from the first opening fight, you're always guaranteed fireworks. And not just from a slugfest point of view, just a couple of gorillas going out there and trying to belt each other, but a lot of good, like, technical, proficient fights with, a lot of fantastic technique. Guys that look like they were sort of, already professionals in some cases. I don't think if you sort of went back, through that period that we're just talking about, like 10 years ago, you would have quite had that sort of to that extent, having like 10 or 11 fights where all the fights are fantastic. We're thoroughly entertained right through. Would you share that opinion that you wouldn't go back that far and see that level, even from the amateur point of view, compared to what you see today? And it's a credit to, those gyms just sort of stepping it up with those expectations, the resources, and everything else we're seeing.
We're starting to see now the generation of MMA fighters that have, that's all they've done is MMA. They're not coming from kickboxing. They're not coming from BJJ.
They're not doing it as a fitness thing like in the footy off season or anything like that anymore.
They're starting in MMA at a young age and continuing MMA. So we're seeing guys with such a well-rounded skill set. We're just not seeing like, back in the day, I remember going to fights where there was guys who was a stand-up guy and if it got to the ground, it looked like the first day he'd ever been on the ground. And vice versa, I saw jiu-jitsu guys zombie walking, trying to take people down because they had no takedowns. And, and kickboxers, bashing them, so it, and we saw a lot of those really one-dimensional characters. Now, I mean, in the lowest levels, in the first fight amateur guys, if you can't do it all, you're in big trouble. If you don't have takedowns, wrestling defense, jiu-jitsu, stand-up, you know what I mean? You don't have cage control. If you can't wrestle on the cage, if you can't get up off the cage, you can't prevent takedowns against the cage, all that really specific stuff, you can't do that. Like, you're going to be finding yourself in really, really deep water in the amateurs, let alone in the pros. And that's where, like I said, you see a really, really big difference is, because before guys were jiu-jitsu guys and they would come across and fight MMA, or you were a kickboxer and you would come and fight MMA, and you'd learn a little bit of the other, but if you ended up in a bad area, it was going to be really bad for you. Now, it's hard to find a bad area for these kids. They've got skills everywhere.
And so when you're sort of getting yourself into these gyms and you're checking out what's going on, like what are you sort of looking for when you go in there? Like, is there a particular, purpose you're sort of getting in there? Is it, sort of spread the word of sort of what's going on, fact-finding missions? Like, what's the point for yourself, like getting in there and checking out what's going on?
Well, this year, I've done a little bit of talking with Cam and stuff, and we're going to do a bunch of Eternal Gym series where I go into these gyms and we're going to actually sort of explore that topic, explore what they're doing in these gyms, have a look at their coaching staff, have a look at what they're doing in the particular gyms. And that's sort of why I've been popping in, sort of just staying familiar with the gyms that I'm already familiar with, and then sort of branching out into some of the other ones. So when I do go and do these, interviews with the gym, I sort of already sort of know who they are. We sort of have a bit of a rapport already. And yeah, it's just something that we want to do for the fans and something that we want to do for the gyms this year, which is to get out there. Hey, who are you guys? What are you doing? That way, everybody, like, if you have a favorite fighter, if you have, if you're moving to the area from somewhere else, hey, you can have a look at who's in your area, who fights out of what gym, who the coaching staff are, what the facilities are at those gyms, and you can just watch it on the Eternal series and you'll get to see all these gyms.
Fantastic. I mean, that just raises the profile for everyone, right? I mean, the guys fighting in Eternal, gyms at large, like it's all just about contributing towards the scene and growing everything and, contribute, I guess, to fostering that growth, for all that young talent coming through. Is there anywhere in particular that you've sort of got to, any gyms that stand out for you, a place you like going in particular, like who's standing out in your mind as the gym sort of leading the way in the areas you're getting into?
Man, it's hard to say there's any one gym. There's just so many good fighters from different gyms. And like I said, it's got so much more professional, such better, like I said, the structure of what they're doing, coaches for this, coaches for that, coaches for wrestling, coaches for jiu-jitsu, coaches for stand-up. It's not sort of one guy just doing everything now. Do you know what I mean? They're sort of, but yeah, it's hard to say. And again, like, all these gyms have put in so much money to these facilities. They're no longer just a hole in the wall with, some jigsaw mats on the ground and, some mats stacked up against the wall, and that's your wall wrestling. That can still work. Don't get me wrong. That the old school gyms still work, but you're seeing a lot more money. You're going into these gyms now. Like I said, if you go into TFC, this thing is so big, you can get lost in there. Like there's so much space to roll, to kickbox, to box. Plus you have a full size cage to get ready in, a ring. But like I said, this isn't unlike other gyms. There's plenty of other gyms that have big mat spaces, cages, rings. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that's why I really, really want to do this series, to show people how much money and effort have been put into these gyms, and sort of have some of these guys talk about where they started. And like I said, the hole in the wall, jigsaw mat gyms they started versus what we have now for these guys.
Yeah, I mean, so much to look forward to, man. I can't wait to see what comes of that. Very interesting. Again, just to sort of see a lot of those new guys coming through. Hopefully see a lot of those new guys coming through on that Eternal MMA scene. Getting them through the amateur ranks, and we've seen so many guys like come through. We got Quillan Soulkilled as the champion now, still so young in his career. I mean, some of the old guys sticking around, the guys we've had go to the UFC, and we'll talk about a couple of those guys a little bit in the piece. But I mean, we look back on 2023 and what a year that was. 101 matches presided over, with 54 of those as professional fights. I think 3 states we got to, including Queensland, Western Australia, New South Wales. 9 events that were broadcasted on UFC Fight Pass. I mean, just absolutely epic stuff there. Getting the broadcast, our fighters, the world round. And the viewership, from what I'm told and from what I understand, is absolutely massive. It's not just us tuning in to see these fights. We're getting the attention internationally as well, which is fantastic. And I mean, that sort of thing is also highlighted by the fact we're breaking records with gate attendance. Heading over to Perth, Western Australia, my favourite event in HBF Stadium. 3.5K breaking the record attendance there. And we're going to keep breaking records the more we go back there, because Perth's the hotbed for that. And 2 Eternal MMA fighters that we had last year cross over from Eternal MMA and join the rest of the ranks in the UFC. None bigger, obviously, than we got Tom Nolan fighting this weekend, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Stephen Erceg, our former flyweight champion, making waves over there as well. So just all in all, from the guys that we've had come over or start here, the Jack Della Maddalenas, the Casey O'Neills, and these guys that are heading over there now, and everything in between with the guys coming through. Eternal MMA is kicking goals, man. I'm very much looking forward to 2024.
Yeah, look, like I said, COVID really, really slowed things up, and no one was sure quite what was going to happen, how long it was going to take to get out of that black hole. But now, like I said, like last year, it was a cracker year for Eternal. You probably couldn't really write it any better than that. You know what I mean? In terms of belts changing hands, the middleweight division came alive again. We had standout performances, comeback performances. We had old guys come, well, not old guys come back, but injured guys come back. You know, we had, we had a lot of these fun guys like Kappa and that come out who just.
Where's Kappa, our man?
Yeah, and like I said, again, like these guys are just fun, and it's sort of made it fun to watch. And it doesn't surprise me that overseas guys are watching, because we're starting to pump more guys. Like I said, Tom Nolan's about to fight. Steve fought twice already in the UFC.
He's had 2 fights in UFC, won both his fights. Yeah. So he's rolling.
So
already in the top 15.
So again, and these guys are coming out of Eternal and stuff like that. So if you're an overseas guy, you need to look at the tape on these guys. I mean, watch tape. That's what you should be doing. Watch tape. I mean, how do you watch tape? Hey, watch Eternal. Watch the tape on these guys. That's what I would be doing. Even if you're coming out here from, because, we seem to have a bit of a line on guys from Korea wanting to come out here and fight in Australia, which is obviously really good to get that international component happening. We had guys come from Thailand, America come and fight. So again, these gyms are going to want to look at what these gyms are doing and what our fighters are doing, because, you want to watch tape before you come over here.
And you just talked about a guy there, Wes Kappa, in terms of, one of the more fun guys that we've had come over to Eternal MMA. You can talk a lot about Wes Kappa and, what he's sort of done in the past with his boxing, but what a pleasure it was to have him back in mixed martial arts. Speaking of him and the awards we're going to talk about, he was our comeback fighter of the year for 2023. Maybe not a man more deserving of that accolade. Hell of a fun bloke. Had a great fight that first time we saw him back at HBF Stadium. Got the job done in his first fight there, and then got the job done in his second fight as well. The style and everything. He's a fan favorite. He wants to get himself down to lightweight. He said he was packing the weight a little bit there in those couple of fights, but he's moving down to lightweight for an upcoming fight. He's looking for that title. But Wes Kappa, our comeback fighter of the year, and what a story and what a pleasure to have the Capitator Kappa around for some fights in Eternal MMA.
Yeah, look, okay, so you've just confirmed a rumor that I heard. I heard that he was going down to lightweight. I assumed it was a rumor, but you're saying that that's where he's gone. We
got a confirmed fight. Yeah, we got a confirmed fight. Okay. He's fighting. I can't remember if it was Eternal 82 or Eternal 83, but we got Wes Kappa coming back, and he's fighting at lightweight. Man,
this guy hits like a truck at welter. If he can keep that power down at lightweight, yeah, that's a dangerous proposition, because he's almost got that Deontay Wilder style thing where he can make mistakes because he's got the eraser right here. Any mistake he makes, he can fix it up in one punch. And, and the thing is too, he does have that eraser, but he's also, for me, he's a lot more intelligent than, say, your Deontay Wilder in terms of boxing intelligence, fight smart. He really has a kickboxing acumen. You see him work the body to get him to drop the hands so he can go to the head, the high, low, do you know what I mean? And, over there at Scrappy, they've given him just enough defensive wrestling and jiu-jitsu to keep himself out of trouble on the ground and get back to his feet. And every round starts on its feet. And yeah, look, I think, that's just what makes him fun. That's what makes him exciting. And at lightweight, if he can make lightweight and do it pretty easy, there's a lot of good fighters, though. There's a hell of a lot of good fighters in that division. But yeah, I would suggest hands up would be my first suggestion to anybody fighting Mr. Kappa.
He called for it. After those fights, that he had him, and we cast back to his Eternal 76 when we were first introduced to him, at least from an Eternal MMA perspective. And the first memory we have there is, Wes Kappa walking out to the cage, and then we've got alarms going off in the background. It looks like a fire alarm happening there, so we got a bit of a delay. But, that just really set the tone and set the scene for the Wes Kappa introduction. For him to sort of get that win and then go into his next card and fight Kevin Piras, I think it was. Dealing with, you remember the Kevin Piras guy that's fighting? All the kicks and everything, man. That was absolutely wild. So, again, what a story it is for Wes Kappa. He has said that he wants to come for that lightweight strap. So he comes back in, gets the comeback fighter of the year for Eternal MMA. Let's see what he can do in 2024.
Yeah, no, he, like I said, exciting fighter. That's crazy that he's going to lightweight. That's, fantastic. Bombs away. Good luck to the lightweight division.
Good luck to the lightweight division indeed. My apologies, envision. We can envision Wes Kappa getting himself a lightweight title shot there in the lightweight division. I might just sort of segue off my little grammatical mistake there. But we move on. Speaking of the lightweight division, we move on to knockout of the year, and that was Quillan Sol Killed. I had my thoughts about who might be knockout of the year. I think you might have had your thoughts about who might be knockout of the year. There was plenty of knockouts you could have chosen from 2023, but ultimately Quillan Sol Killed gets the nod from his knockout to capture the lightweight title off Blake Donnelly with a heavy right punch, heavy right hand over the top to absolutely put his lights out. Followed through with a left hook, but he didn't need it because Blake Donnelly was already out. Captures the lightweight title. He moves on as the champion, but what a knockout highlight that was.
Look, I think we spoke off screen about what we think was the knockout, but although me and you both disagree with this being the knockout of the year, it probably is because it was the most significant knockout. There was other massive knockouts, but to knock a guy out in this fashion in the first round to capture the belt, there's probably no more significant knockout than Quillan's knockout. So on that alone, it probably does. And that's why we're doing the podcast and we're not running the show, because Cam's smarter. Cam's right.
He knows what he's doing. Yeah.
Yeah, Cam's right. That is the most significant knockout. It was a big knockout. It was a fantastic performance from him. It captured the lightweight belt. So it really was, a great knockout. But like you said, there was a bunch of knockouts this year that any one of them could have taken home the strap for best knockout. But yeah, I think Quillan probably, just for the magnitude of that moment, it probably is the correct one. And again, that's why Cam's the boss and we're just the underlings.
No, fair play to Quillan Sol Killed. You couldn't take it away from him. But we did talk a little bit off screen or before the recording about our thoughts. What was your sort of thoughts and feelings? Why don't you share who you thought might have been potentially winning this one? Because I know I've got my one. Who was sort of your thoughts for the knockout of the year?
Yeah, look, I like, it probably wasn't as in visually effectively the big knockout, but Martin Fraser, that, man.
When you talk about the magnitude of that, yeah.
And just the way he did that and the way he marched forward in that fight and the ferocity and the sound because I was cage side with Cam, the sound those punches were making.
Yeah.
And I was.
And it was ferocious, man, like the barrage. Like I didn't know he moved that quick, man.
Brutal.
Yeah.
It was brutal. And to see him just sink after those shots in the corner.
Yeah.
It was, although it wasn't that one shot clean click.
Sure.
It was just, just the volume, the barrage, the ferocity.
But that first one that he hit him with too, and it stumbled back, and because you look at the guy like Brogan Anderson coming in, he looked like he was so much bigger, like, a guy that's fought at light heavyweight, and, I think John's, fought down as well as welterweight. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. The size difference, but he caught him with that one and just, went back to the cage. As you said, you were cage side, you would have heard it. I could hear it through the TV, but just what a barrage, man. Had it been John Martin Fraser for that, we could have given it to him. That was a hell of a knockout all around.
And Brogan's a big kid and can fight. He's very, very accomplished fighter, and that's what I'm saying. He had a great year himself. John Martin Fraser. He sort of what was a bit of a almost what would you say, dormant division. He's really, really put that excitement back in it between him and Ben Johnson. Yep. They sort of, I'm going to steal the phrase, they made the middleweights great again. And
there it is. You got to include Matt Myers in that mix as well. Matt Myers hanging around.
There was lots of good fights. Look, there's plenty of good fights to have. Obviously, Cam's put Ben Johnson and John Martin Fraser together, which is the right fight.
Sign me up.
for the strap. Again, I'll watch that anywhere, any day. If those guys want to get into it in the car park at Aldi's, whatever, I'll go watch that everywhere. But again, like good knockouts from him. And which one did you think was the knockout of the year? Which one did you?
For me, at Eternal 78, Sebastian Salai with his one hitter quitter over Joe Davis was that was highlight worthy. That made UFC Fight Pass highlights. That was absolutely devastating. I mean, Seb Salai, like what an up and comer he is out of the freestyle MMA up with Alexander Volkanovski, Justin Van Heerden, all those guys. I mean, that was brutal, man. I was at that card, but I just missed it because I was late from the airport. I didn't know what I'd missed until I watched it back on the Fight Pass app a little bit later on. But I mean, that was a huge knockout, and that was another one of those ones that you hear that come through the phone screen, the TV screen, whatever you're sort of watching. That was one of the cleaner ones we'd see. So I mean, you go from the brutality of the onslaught of John Martin Fraser. I mean, Quillen Soulkill taking that award obviously with his right hand over the top of Blake Donnelly there, but Seb Salai, man, for me, that was up there. But I mean, you can give it to any one of those three guys. I mean, you got to give a bit of a special shout out to one Victor Lyle as well with the Fortitude Valley head kick there, that big left head kick. If we're talking about the magnitude, if we're talking about the theme, the style points and everything, especially with Victor Lyle and everything that he's known for on the streets, to come in on the fight that he had with Eternal MMA, everything that he said, I mean, feeling overweight, feeling slow, not feeling up to his best and that sort of thing, admittedly not in the best shape, to come in and put an absolute slugfest on like he did, got me out of my chair, certainly with that big head kick knockout. That was epic, and I mean, that was just a bit of fun, man, like to see something like that. So you could have given it to a guy like Victor Lyle as well.
And again, it's one of those things where, Victor gained a lot of fame through the Fortitude Valley disagreement he had with a couple of local youngsters. And to finish that fight in the same fashion as he sort of, finished that young fella's confidence, you couldn't have written it any better. And I'm not sure, but I think there might be a little bit of footage come out of me and Cam at cage side. And Cam called it. He said, I think Victor's going to throw a head kick. And I said, I don't think Victor's got another head kick in him because he looked tired. I
think we've talked about it. Yes.
And
pulls it out.
The rest is history. I saw Glenn Hodgins, who we spoke about earlier from Corporate Box Fortitude Valley. And I said the same thing to him. I said, I honestly didn't think he had a head kick left in him. And he told me Victor has always got one more head kick. So I won't doubt him again. And again, another great knockout and a contender for knockout of the year. And it's like, what a good year to have where you've got so many to talk about and then you have to pick one,
That's exactly it. I mean, you wouldn't want anything more than that. I mean, on top of, just there's not really, I don't think, even when you're watching the UFC, right? I mean, there's plenty of stinky UFC cards and a lot of, a lot of stinker fights and that sort of thing. And this isn't coming from a place of bias. I think the vast majority of fights that I watched, the vast majority, like 99% of the fights we watched, were all pretty damn phenomenal. Of course, you're going to get the occasional one here and there that sort of doesn't live up to it or for whatever reason ain't much of a fight. But there was just so much I was impressed by. There wasn't really many times that, I felt like, hey, this is the one where we go take a bit of a piss break here, like on the edge of your seat stuff all around. So not just the knockouts of the year that we get with Quillen Soulkill and the rest, but I mean, the fights top to bottom were fantastic as well. And we talk about that in terms of finishes. We move on to submission of the year. One, Peter Templer taking out his former teammate in Lockie Stitt. Lockie Stitt, a man that couldn't get himself a fight. Cam O'Neill trying his hardest to get this man a fight. Massive up-and-coming prospect out of Triple X Fight Academy, training there with Caleb Rideout. Caleb Rideout himself coming back for his welterweight title, and we'll talk a little bit about that at some point. But, I mean, what a story that was. Lachlan Stitt, odds were forever in his favour. It seemed like Peter Templer was just the body to come in there and be the showcase dummy, I guess you could sort of say, for Lockie Stitt, but completely turns the tables, gets the submission with the rear naked choke. We spoke a little bit about this off camera before we started here. Lockie Stitt had the position on top, wanted to get the fight back to the feet. I guess that's where he felt most comfortable. Peter Templer gets back to the ground, sweeps position with the head and arm lock from the guard position, doesn't give it up, gets to his back, sinks in the rear naked choke. That's all she wrote. And Peter Templer moves on to bigger and better things. So congratulations to Peter Templer on the submission of the year.
Yeah, no, it was a great submission, and I guess it's like I said before when we were talking about the caliber of fighters. Now, you can get these guys in off a short run up, and they're going to compete, and they're going to compete well because they're complete fighters. You're not getting a jiu-jitsu guy in on 3 weeks notice or a kickboxer guy in. You're getting MMA fighters in. Yeah, their gas tank might not be there, but the skill level's there, and that's why even off a short run up, you're seeing some of these great results in Eternal, and we've seen fighters off short run ups, outperform and excel, on these cards. And this was he got that sweep, stuck to him, really was that boa constrictor, worked his way to the back. It never looked like he was ever going to let go. And it was pretty clinical. He just kept working it. And he listened to his corner. You could hear his corner yelling. And, he really did, all the right things, and just bit by bit got it in there, job done. And like I said, that's sort of the performance you want to have, where you don't leave those spaces. You can't afford to leave those spaces because you probably aren't as fit as your opponent. You're not probably as skilled, or they didn't think, you weren't really the guy to come in there and get the win. You were to put on a fight 100%, but were you the guy to win? If you're asking me, if I was a betting man, I would have put the house, the shed, the car, everything to Stitt. And, here we are.
I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, it's probably not really a fair question to ask about, how much Lockie Stitt might regret giving up that position. I mean, he had that top position. I mean, he was in control. I spoke to him before the fight, and he said that, he was sort of confident anywhere sort of the fight would go. I mean, we've seen Lockie Stitt, on the feet, and all the skills that he sort of got there. He was my personal knockout of the year for 2022. Cam saw fit not to give that knockout of the year for 2022, but his knees, I can't remember his opponent, but the knee that he shut the lights off with that bloke was definitely knockout of the year. But, I mean, when you're in that sort of position, I mean, you could speak to this better than me, but, I mean, when you've got the position in someone's guard and you're controlling the fight, and you're 2 or 3 fights into your career, like, what's to be said about a guy giving up that position to try to bring it back to the feet? Do you go there where you butter your bread, or do you take that position and stay there? Because, I mean, that's ultimately what cost him the fight, because it was as soon as they got to the feet, that's when Peter got it back down to the ground and ultimately finished the fight.
Yeah, look, and this is, again, it's so hard to answer this because maybe that was the game plan. Maybe the game plan was to finish it on the feet. Maybe they'd seen something. They'd trained together previously. Maybe he got it over him in sparring. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, like, it's hard to say. Like, obviously they trained together before. So maybe it's something he saw in him in sparring. Maybe he got it over him on his feet, and that's where the confidence level was. That's where he thought he could do it from. He seemed to be controlling it on the ground. He seemed to be, again, it's hard to say. Maybe he saw a knockout. Maybe he saw a standing finish. Maybe Templar had got the better of him on the ground in the past, and it was, he thought, hey, it's only a matter of time before this guy sweeps me, which he did eventually. And maybe that's something he foresaw and didn't want that to eventuate. But look, it's giving up position, and there's no point in really looking back on it and saying like, hey, I shouldn't have done, lesson learned. I think if you gave him that opportunity again, I think he'd probably stay in that position. You know what I mean? I think he looked fine there. But again, like I said, you never know sort of what someone's thinking in those positions. We weren't there. We weren't feeling the fight. Maybe he just felt like, hey, I'm going to put this back on the feet. I've sparred him. I've beaten him on the feet before. He knows he can't match it with me up there. And but Templar had other ideas, and that is the game. Game plan versus game plan, and someone's got to win.
Someone's got to win, and someone's got to win submission of the year, and Peter Templar did just that. So all the best to Peter Templar and whatever comes next for him. I don't know if we've seen that he's got an upcoming fight, but I mean, Lockie Stitt gets a chance to redeem himself when he takes on Elliot Compton at Eternal 83. So that's a hell of a fight to look forward to there. Sign me up for that one for sure.
Easy fights.
What's that?
No easy fights.
No easy fights indeed. So, I mean, going up against a guy like Elliot Compton, boy, oh boy. I mean, he's obviously a kickboxing legend, coming over to Eternal MMA, or coming across to MMA in general. But, I mean, up-and-coming prospect like Lockie Stitt. And I'm sure Lockie Stitt's going to be fine, but, I mean, what a test for him coming against a story combat veteran like Elliot Compton. That's big time. That's huge.
Yeah, it's a great fight, and again, I'm happy for both those guys in terms of neither of them have ducked that fight. That's a tough fight for both guys. Nobody is getting an easy fight out of that. Both guys are really skilled. Both guys are very good, and I'm always happy when I see those guys not try to pad the record, not say, oh, okay, well, I had a loss, now I need to go and get a win to get my confidence back. It's tough fight after tough fight. And, it's good for the sport. It's good for them. You know what I mean? It sort of really shows where you are at in that division, and going and getting yourself an easy fight, it's not always the best idea. If you're on a bit of a skid, you lost 3 in a row, you might need to go and chase yourself down a confidence fight. But hey, you lost a fight. It was, an interesting decision in terms of, hopping up from that grounded position, and it may have cost him the fight. So I think his confidence will be fine. Elliot, obviously, his team out there, they've got Tom Nolan stuff out there. They've got Jaden Binney. They've got John Marfan. They've got a group of guys out there. Their stable's very, very solid. He's obviously a seasoned veteran in terms of fighting. He's not going to feel those nerves like some other fighters are going to feel those nerves. So, like I said, both guys very, very good. Both guys can win that fight. And on that card, which already has Ben Johnson, that's a cracker start to 2024.
It's a hell of a start to 2024. I mean, we just talked about the Compton training center there, and a few of the guys you just mentioned. Don Marfan. Don Marfan takes out our fighter of the year for 2023. I mean, what a run that he had. 3 fights, 3 wins that he had. Jordan Thomas, James O'Brien, Michael Stanoff, riffing off those 3 guys. His last 2 wins came by way of finish by submission. Don Marfan, definitely a fighter known for his grappling abilities, and he certainly showcased that, especially in his last couple of fights. He's coming back in to rematch Quillan Solkilled for that lightweight title. The rumors were that coming into his last fight against Michael Stanoff, that he was potentially offered the rematch against Quillan Solkilled to go for that lightweight title and get that win back. He said that he wanted to get another fight in. Maybe that was a decision made by himself and his team at large, but I mean, it sets us up for an even bigger fight now that he's gone on that 3-fight winning streak. Looked good doing it, still very young, still growing in the game, but he's showing a hell of a lot of promise, and I'm very much looking forward to that lightweight title fight that we're set up so big for now to kick off the new Eternal year for 2024. But Don Marfan, training with those guys like Tom Nolan, Elliot Compton, and all those guys, takes out our fighter of the year for 2023. What a year for Don Marfan. Yeah,
the Street Buddha, he had a year like that. That's the year you want to have after you lose to Quillan. I think he made the right decision not fighting Quillan again and getting another fight, another high-level guy. Absolutely. In between him and Quillan, another camp, another chance to gain skill, another chance to get a complete full camp in. And I think the other thing with him too is, like, I see a lot of fighters go through camps and they'll win fights, but they look like the guy who fought last time, and they're good. But with Dom, I just think every time I see him, he's just a little bit better than the
You're seeing growth.
And I just see he just seems to be getting better and better every single time he fights. And I think Quillan's going to fight a much more well-equipped, more experienced fighter than the guy he fought last time. And obviously it sets it up for an amazing fight. Like this is a cracker fight for the belt.
It's an absolute cracker fight for the belt. I mean, sitting atop a card that's got 4 title fights, we're certainly stacking the deck there. So, I mean, to have a rematch, with those guys and the lightweight title on the line, it doesn't get any bigger than that. But, I mean, for a guy like Don Marfan, everything that he's got going for him, I mean, you talk about, where he sort of butters his bread with that grappling game. I mean, you're training with some of the best strikers in the world. Again, we're going to talk about Tom Nolan, him fighting this week. But, I mean, guys like Stephen Elliott Compton training with guys like Tom Nolan. Don Marfan talked to me about this, in terms of like just getting his licks in with those guys. I mean, how much of a benefit is that for him coming in a guy like Quillan Solkilled, who is very extremely well-rounded in all facets of the game? We know how dangerous Quillan is with his hands. So, how much is he going to need to lean on that gym with those guys we just talked about to be able to match Quillan Solkilled when they come in for this rematch?
Look, obviously having those guys is a massive advantage. Having guys at that level to push you, and it's the old adage, iron sharpens iron. It's true. We'll say it a million more times yet because it's just the truth. And to have those guys in your stable and access to those guys every time you train. And obviously there's also, and this is true for all gyms, there's a group of killers that'll be in every gym that just don't compete. Do you know what I mean? And out at Compton's will be no different. I know some of the guys who go and train out there, and I know a few guys who train out there and don't compete. And those guys are very, very skilled. Those guys can fight. And that's the thing, like everyone you see like at Eternal, they're the guys who actually fight. But there's a whole team behind that of guys you may never hear of who are super skilled, but competition just isn't for them for one reason or another, whether that's for personal reason, work reasons, competing's just not their thing. They're happy just to turn up to the gym. But, a gym like Compton, they've got a bunch of unnamed killers out there training. And he's not only got access to Tom Nolan, to all these high-end guys, and obviously Elliot, and having Steve there, who's just, he's a old head to put on top of these young guys, to try and impart his wisdom to them. But you also have like a gym full of guys who are turning up 5 days a week because this is their indoor soccer, this is their volleyball, this is just what they do. And so you've got access to all of them as well. So, and out there, there's a lot of good guys out there that you just don't know, you just haven't heard of. So it's a big team out there. They're, and like I said, they're known for their kickboxing, but obviously they're becoming really well known for their MMA as well. But I couldn't imagine there's a round out there that's a rest round. I couldn't imagine when you're striking, there's no rest round out there, right? You're striking with the best guys all the time. When you're rolling with the best guys all the time. There's no rest rounds. And that's the other thing when we're talking about the growth of these gyms. That's what you see now. You go to these gyms and there's a whole army of unnamed guys who don't compete, but are killers in the gym, who turn up 5 nights a week, 4 nights a week, whatever it is. And you're competing. There's no more rest rounds. There's no easiness, if that makes sense. And that's why you're seeing these guys. And that's why you're seeing guys like Don Martin excel, and you're seeing him go up and up because he's got access to all these guys, plus UFC level guys like Tom Nolan and, international kickboxing level guys like Elliot Compton, that type of things, like the cherry on top. But there's all these other guys that are in those camps. And again, like I said, when I do these series, I'm going to try and unmask some of these, so you can see some of these faces.
Can't wait, man. Can't wait.
Sees.
Yes.
But yeah, no, look, Don Martin, definitely, I agree 100% with Cam. Definitely fighter of the year. Great performances. He's, and for a kid that young, him and Quillen both, this fight is not just for the belt. This fight's for the next step in your career. Whoever wins this, it's that one step up. It's, it's contender series kind of chat. It's, you win this fight, you're sort of on your way to the next level. And because they're both young kids, they're both, plenty of time left to get there. You got guys like John Martin Fraser, who's got to put the foot on the gas a little bit. Father Time is chasing him. He's right behind him. So, and same for Benny Johnson. Benny Johnson's not getting any younger. So again, good fight for those guys. And again, these are all coming up on these upcoming cards. And they're all, foot to the metal, get these fights, get them done. And now we can have a look at where you can go afterwards. But circling back around, Don Martin, definitely the fighter of the year. And this is probably, I guess, the fight I'm probably looking forward to the most in terms of he lost, he got a lot better, and now we're going to have that fight again. Both guys riding ultimate confidence, both guys highly skilled, and both guys, this fight's for everything. This is for all the chocolates.
Couldn't have said it better myself, man. Don Martin, our fighter of the year for 2023, follows on in the footsteps from Justin Van Heerden, who went on an epic run himself back in 2022, 4-fight winning streak.
Where is Justin?
Where is Justin? I mean, I think we've got bigger things coming up for Justin. I mean, he's keeping his cards close to his chest. I don't know. I'm not hiding anything. I don't have any information, but I mean, I'm reading between the lines, and I think there might be something coming up for Justin. And for my money, we're segueing a little bit here, but I mean, Justin Van Heerden certainly gave us a hell of a 2022. Went on a run. I mean, I look back at Justin's record recently, and there was a couple of fights. I'm like, yeah, cool. No, you got the job done against those guys, and great wins, that sort of thing. But I mean, I cast back to that fight that he had against that. I mean, he was considered sort of the boogeyman of the division there for a little bit, and a few other promotions. It was Muhammad Alavi, was it, or whatever it was? Like, he's that big hulking dude that he ended up taking out with the rear naked choke. And I think, like, man, that was another fight that he just got into that run of 4 fights. Punctuated by getting the job done over Rod Costa in Perth with that knockout win. So, again, I know we sort of segued a bit there, but hats off to Justin Van Heerden. I can't wait to see what comes from him next.
Yeah, he obviously he had some amazing performances, and then it sort of went quiet. And I'm probably a little bit selfish. I want to see, like, when you're on a run, when you're hot, when people are calling you out, when your name's hot, it's everywhere. I kind of want to see you keep that energy, because when things go quiet, things go quiet. But hopefully the quiet is the calm before the storm for something bigger for him. Hopefully that's what's going to happen.
Fingers crossed, we'll see what happens. But yes, as we said, Don Marfan is our fighter of the year. So well done to Don Marfan out of the Compton Training Center. And speaking of gyms doing big things, I mean, we had Taser Malone taking out our breakthrough fighter of the year. Taser Malone, dyed in the wool, Eternal MMA boy, cut his teeth coming up through the ranks, through his amateur career for Eternal MMA. Goes into his pro career, wins his 2 fights from 2 fights in 2023. Looked very good doing it. Looked even better in his second performance when he got the job done against Mason Nobetsu at Eternal 81. But I mean, what are they putting in the water down there at CMBT? Because I mean, he's a CMBT boy. You're very familiar with this gym. Taser Malone doing big things. I've had the privilege of speaking to him, and I'll elaborate a bit on that. But Taser Malone, breakthrough fighter of the year out of CMBT.
Yeah, look, Taser's originally a Shindo guy down there with Kerry Dunn and stuff. He fought a lot of his amateur career down there, and he did well. He won some, lost some, and that's the type of amateur career you want. Go out there, he fought a bunch of fights, you win, you lose, but no one cares about your amateur career. Once you go pro, anything you did in amateur doesn't matter. And I really think that he had a smart amateur career in terms of he fought a variety of guys. He won some, he lost some, but he gained all that experience. And then when he got to pros, he went over to CMBT. I think it was a good move for him. It was a good fit for him. And obviously he's had, he's the breakout fighter. He had 2 fantastic performances. That guy's got a gas tank. Like I don't think I've ever seen anybody that continue to grind like him. He's like a more skillful Clay Guida. He just keeps coming and coming. It's just overwhelming the amount of the pace he puts on you.
And looks fit too. Like he's in shape, man. Like he's cut. Like he looks like a fighter. I mean, for a guy so young, like he just look. I mean, I know all these guys look in shape, but I mean, he looks in shape, man. Like he's good to go at all times.
Well, one of his teammates informed me that he did the Gold Coast Marathon, and I was like, okay, well, you're just showing off now. And then I got informed by one of his other teammates he did it barefoot. And I was like,
oh shit.
Yeah. So this is the type of character that you're dealing
connecting
with,
to the earth, man. Yeah.
Yeah, or you're running barefoot. Like, first off, I wouldn't run in Gold Coast barefoot.
No. God, no, man.
Like, it's not the place to run barefoot. But that's just the character he is. He's the type of guy, like, he's fighting MMA, running marathons. Apparently, he used to play competitive AFL. He just enjoys pushing his body. He's just one of those characters who, almost that David Goggins-y kind of, skirting that fine line of genius, insanity. And, he just got that mentality where he can push and push. And, obviously he's there at CMBT. Those guys are helping him build his skills. And sort of when you have that gas tank meets that skill level, it's obviously, I think there's big things for the kid if he can stay healthy. He doesn't get a needle stick injury running barefoot in the Gold Coast. And, obviously the boys at CMBT have got a really good crew of kids down there, good crew of guys who are coming up. And again, so it's good coaches, good gym, iron sharpening iron. So yeah, I think he was a good choice for breakout fighter of the year. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see how he goes this year.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, I think it's more than just sort of that 2023. I mean, it's a culmination of, him doing, good things in his amateur career with Eternal MMA and showing so many sort of levels and growing his game. And like you said, it's not about the wins and losses in your amateur career, but sort of setting yourself up for what you do in your pro career. I mean, I spoke to him before he made his pro debut when he had the win against Tom Pratt back at Eternal 74. And it wasn't for the podcast. It was more just sort of an article to, introduce him, I guess, to the people and what he's sort of about. And I mean, he's not the first guy that I've spoken to in their car or anything like that. But it was nighttime and he was in the front seat of his van. He sort of looked rugged up and I just asked like, oh, sorry, you out and about? And he just said like, look, no, I'm basically, I'm living my van. I'm living out the front of the gym. And he just said, this is just what I'm doing. He's so dedicated to the fight game. Like this is what he wants to do. And I know that sounds cliched, but that's not, and you would know this isn't necessarily the mentality of absolutely everybody. I think a lot of fight fans are a bit naive and think that everyone in MMA, they're dedicating their absolute life to it, but they're not. And Taser is just one of those guys. This is his absolute life. And he's doing everything, mind, body and soul, sacrificing, just giving his absolute all to the game and training with the right guys and doing what he has to do to get to the top. And more power to him. So absolutely deserving a breakthrough fighter of the year. We'll see what he does against Jaden Binney at Eternal 83. So that's something very much to look forward to. But he is our breakthrough fighter of the year. So let's see what he does in 2024. Maybe he goes on to be our fighter of the year. But for now, Taser Malone, well done. We move on to the last one that we had was the fight of the year. Now, this was a fight, Khan Diata versus Samad Janahara. Now, I had a little bit of a rewatch of this fight again before we came and talked on this podcast. I do have visions of that fight, but I mean, we had a lot of fights that we had last year, but my God, this was more than deserving a fight of the year. I mean, absolute war through the first round to the second round to the third round. End up going the way of Janahara by split decision in the end. But I mean, you could have given it either way to any one of those guys. I mean, there was just some fantastic moments in both the first round, the second round, and the third round. The first round, we saw Janahara land a left head kick to the head of Diata, wobbled him, run him for the kill, only for Diata to fire one down the pipe, just a line drive and drop Janahara, who got back to his feet and a brawling shoot in the middle. We go to the second round. I think there was a groin shot there from Diata to Janahara, and he sort of waved it off and said, no, let's keep going. And then just an absolute slugfest broke out for about 5 seconds in the middle of the cage. There was walls up against the cage. It was to the ground. There was a lot of technical elements to the fight. There was at times where it was just a bloody war. I mean, it had absolutely everything. Diata landed a couple of jumping switch kicks to the face of Janahara, I believe, in the third round, who just walked through it and kept going, didn't seem phased whatsoever. But, I mean, you heard it, hit him on the chops and just kept marching forward. So, I mean, those two guys, I mean, there was plenty of good fights, like we said. But, I mean, that was an absolute war. You could have given it to either one of those guys. Their stock grows for both of them. Can't wait to see what comes next for both of them. But just an absolute cherry on top of the fights we have for 2023. Hats off to Khan Diata and Samad Janahara. What an absolute fight of the year that was.
Yeah, look, and that's like when it comes to fight of the year, those kind of wars that end in split decisions, I always like to see them get fight of the year. You know what I mean? Like when it's that close.
If someone's got to lose as well, and we can just give them something like fight of the year, like, it just makes it a little bit better for, for the guy that doesn't sort of come out on top.
And look, it was one of those fights where it really was every second person you asked had a different opinion. No, I thought he won. No, I thought he won. And for me, that is how good that fight was, because, and it didn't matter. Like I asked general people, general fans, like, just casual fans, what did you think? And I asked coaches and fighters, what did you think? And I barely got the same answer from two people. Yeah. So it was all, where were you sitting at the cage? What do you score higher? What do you know what I mean? It was almost down to your own individual preference for what you like more in MMA, which we saw all of. We saw the standing, the ground, the cage. We saw, we got to see MMA through through all its ranges. And yeah, again, like I think also it was a testament to the judges, to the referees, that fight. It was just everything went as well as it could. The judges got it right in terms of the split decision. It really was that close. Again, everyone was happy with the decision. If it had gone either way, everyone would have been happy with it. The referees were right on top of that groin shot, but like, the kid's too tough for his own good. Don't worry about it.
Wave it off to keep going. Yep.
More balls later. Let's keep fighting. And that's the crowd. I don't know if you remember how loud that crowd was.
God, man. Yeah.
They were yelling. And then it sets up that stage for everything else. To see a fight like that and have the crowd so involved in a fight like that, that's, obviously that's every promoter's wet dream. That's you want that type of war. And, doing what we're doing now, talking about that war, reliving that war, and if anyone hasn't watched that fight, go back, watch that fight. It is a cracker for Australian MMA. It's a cracker for any MMA, Australian, international, anywhere. Those guys let it all hang out, left nothing, to wonder. That neither one of those kids would go home and say, I didn't give it my all. The only problem is they're probably going to have to do it again at some stage. And I don't think any of them would be looking forward to that after the beating they gave each other.
I mean, I would like to see that again, but I mean, either one of those guys, I'd like to see them get back in there and mix it up. I think we do have a fight coming up for Candiata, and forgive me, I can't remember who it is, but we've got him back in the cage. So with his style and everything, obviously he'd be looking to sort of get that back, get himself back in the win column. But again, his stock goes up with an absolutely incredible performance. Doesn't win on the night, but I mean, wins in our hearts and minds with an absolute cracking performance. Like you said, could have gone either way. So tip of the cap to both of those guys. That's our fight of the year for 2023. I'm curious for you, Darryl, is there anything that sort of stands out for you in general? Are you the kind of guy that's got any particular favorite fights of yourself, any UFC fights or anything you can sort of hark back to that you think, hey, if I'm going to show a person a fight and say, this is the fight you want to watch for MMA, you want to get into MMA, this is the fight you want to watch, anything local, anything international, is there anything that you could sort of think of at the top of your head?
Look, no, like I said, I think that fight's the right fight for fight of the year. You want to watch an MMA fight, go watch that. That's a cracker fight. That's the fight to watch if you want something exciting, fun. You want to see how good and the level of MMA in Australia. Go and watch that fight. I like fights for different reasons. This upcoming fight between John Martin Fraser and Ben Johnson, it has got me torn because I know Ben personally and I like Ben, but I just love the mongrel, that John Martin Fraser brings to the ring. He's just a rough groundskeeper, Willie character.
The Welsh destroyer, man, yeah.
He's just a brute. And I like the moxie of him. I like the way he fights. I like the way he comes out. He's mean mugging from the moment he comes from out the back. He's staring down everyone. Like anyone here, he'll bash the timekeeper if he's not careful. He just brings that energy to the table, and I really like it. I like that kind of intensity. It's those kind of old Mike Tyson clips where you see him come in and he's just staring and he won't take his eyes off the fighter. And I find that same type of fighter. I like that type of thing. And obviously, John Martin Fraser and Ben Johnson are going to go to war. Ben's my boy. I'm not going to lie, that's my bias, but I'm a big John Martin Fraser fan, and gee, I like the cut of his jib.
We're getting a treat either way. I mean, for you to sort of saying, John coming out with a look on his face, mean mugging everything. I think Matt Myers actually spoke in an article that I had with him when they fought for the second time, that he said, when he first come out and had to stare at him from across the cage, he said he'd never been so scared in his life. And I mean, it didn't look like it because, Matt Myers is a big hulking bloke himself, but he said just staring at him, and he said that he was a big fan of watching John Martin Fraser's fights, when he's sort of coming up and then all of a sudden he's in the cage with him and having to stare at that guy across the other side and just saying how much of the fear of God that put in him, but to go out there and put on the performance he did and get over those fears is absolutely incredible. But, on the other side of that, you talk about how scary John Martin Fraser looks. What a gentleman outside of the cage too. I've had the privilege of having him on the show a couple of times, and he's the kind of guy who's Welsh, drops a lot of F-bombs, but you can say fucking this show as many times as you want, but he messaged me afterwards and he said, I'm really sorry for how many times I swore on the show and everything. I'm like, you're a pussycat, John, you can say fuck as many times as you want on this show. You go in there and you put on the performances that you do for us in Eternal MMA. So John Martin Fraser, Ben Johnson for that title. Huge stuff. I can't wait for that one either.
Yeah, look, it's a fantastic fight, but then if you want to go from this, like the top level, like the belt level MMA, all the way down to, the guys who are just sort of, really making a name for themselves, George Mangos and
all these guys. There's
so many guys who are coming through with amazing skill levels. They're young, they're fit, they're, the skill, their intensity, their want to finish fights. They're not happy just being in a fight. They actually want to finish the fight, which I think, obviously always you should be looking for the finish, because you never know what's around the corner. You never know what the next 5 seconds. I mean, ask Kamaru Usman, when you're winning a fight and you're, 30 seconds away from, yeah, that's right. And, you should always, and I think these young kids, they see that stuff and they take it on board, and you see that type of outcome and you're like, hey, that's not happening to me. And when you see some of these young guys, the way they fight, like that kid stole their lunch money, it's fantastic to watch. And with the skill they do it with, it's like I said, I just think this year is going to be full of cracker fights, a lot of breakthrough performances. These guys who sort of cut their teeth and did some amateur, or not even amateur, but just, started their pro careers last year. Obviously, Taser, all these guys, they're coming through. Brenton Mumford's been in my ear, chewing my head off about this White Lightning, White Lightning's got a fight coming up, right?
He does have a fight coming up. We're just talking about this, and we did have it on the screen there before. We were checking this out. White Lightning is a man we have to keep up for. Christian Lapham had a fight against... his name escapes me. I do have it here somewhere, but Christian Lapham.
Yeah, and he's fighting Brett Tag?
Brett Tag, that's the one. Yes, that's his name. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, because it sort of hits me a little harsh. I don't know if it's just Brett Tag, but I mean, Christian Lapham's apparently the guy we got our eye on from what you're being told from Brent Mumford at CMBT. Look, he's someone to have a look at.
I mean, when Brenton's not in the corner, he's another, like, if you were going to hand out most excited, most animated corner man of the year, Brent Mumford's probably taken it out 5 years in a row. Like, there's no, he's fighting your fight for you outside the ring. The instructions are coming. He's shadow boxing in the corner. He's, I love watching it. It's hard to watch the fight because I end up watching Brenton because he's so involved. And that's the type of coach, type of teammate, and type of corner that you want. He wants you to win as much as he wants to win. He's very, very involved with all these guys. And like I said, he's usually not one for really talking anyone up, but he's unequivocally told me, White Lightning, watch him. I told him I'd give him a shout out on the podcast. So Brenton, if you're watching, here it is. And we'll be watching your boy. And look, Blair from Compton's, he is very, very good. He was, I can't remember the gentleman he fought last time, but he was pretty much putting on a striking clinic right up to the point where I'm not 100% sure what he was doing, but it looked like he'd thrown either a short elbow and then he was going to come back with a upwards elbow. I think that's what it looked like he was going to do, but he got interrupted with a shot sort of behind the ear he didn't see coming, and that wobbled him and finished him. But right up until then, he put on a standout striking clinic and an amazing performance. So it's a chance for redemption for him. And look, this White Lightning guy, I've had a little bit of look at him sparring, a little bit of look at him on pads, and yeah, look, he's not throwing feather dusters. He's got some heavy hands, and I don't know if the ground's going to get too much of a worry. I think they can probably put him in the parking lot and let him have a go. I think it's going to be a stand-up war.
Well, there we go. A shout-out for Christian Lapham versus Blair Bretag at Eternal 83. The card we'll get to see John Martin Fraser versus Ben Johnston. So one to keep an eye at is Christian Lapham. Has fought a couple of times as an amateur for Eternal MMA. He's making his pro debut in that fight. So anyone looking for a new fighter, check out Christian Lapham is your guy. You've heard it here from Darryl Martin. We do have to talk about a couple of extra guys, though, because not only did we have some great fights from last year, not only did we have some award winners for Fight of the Year, Submission of the Year, Knockout of the Year, we had a couple more graduates get themselves back from Eternal MMA over to the shores of the UFC. One, Stephen Erceg, who did fight at the start of the year last year in 2023 for the last time, defending his flyweight championship for Eternal MMA. Went over to the UFC and did big things, made his debut inside the top 15 of the flyweight division, got the win there, looked fantastic doing it. Had another solid performance in his last fight. Wasn't as electric as his previous fight, but did what he had to do against a very, very tough opponent who was coming in throwing some heavy bombs. So Stephen Erceg goes 2-0 to start his UFC career. But we've also got Tom Nolan, another one of the guys from the Compton Training Center, is making his big debut in the UFC this weekend. Tom Nolan, I mean, you were talking about a guy, you're talking about guys looking like someone's stolen their lunch money. Tom Nolan's a guy that looks like someone's stolen his life savings, because, I mean, this is a guy that has bad intentions in everything he throws. I mean, if there's a guy to watch, I mean, as a prospect, not just from Australia, but I mean, you talk about a guy that's 6'3", a lightweight, absolute ferocity, killer in his eyes, like just, throws heavy leather. I mean, the debut that he made for Dana White's Contender Series with his head down and just that rocket shot to the guy's chin and just put him out with one hit. I mean, he talks the talk and he walks the walk, you know what I mean? He's a guy that he almost talks a little bit of Sean Strickland in his game. He's talked to me before about he wants to go in there and put his hands on people. He fantasizes about hurting people, and it's not a gimmick. Like, he wants to hurt people, and you sort of see that kind of look in his eyes. He's an absolute killer. Cannot wait for Tom Nolan's debut this weekend in the UFC.
Look, I'm hanging out for it too. I do have some reservations, and it's not for the skill. It's not for anything like that. But when you come into the UFC, and a little bit the same as Steve Erceg, he came in and had an amazing first performance, a crazy first performance, standout. Like, everyone was talking about you. Joe Rogan was talking about you. Dana White was talking about you. So it was a great performance. That second performance, there's a lot of hype on you. There's a lot of eyes on you, and there's more pressure on you. And I feel like there's a little bit of that for Tom Nolan coming into this fight. You've got you absolutely starched that guy in the Contender Series. You had Dana White saying your name. Dana White's, this is the guy, this guy right here. He's a young kid. It's a lot of pressure for when Dana White, the top of MMA in the world, is hyping you, pointing you, getting eyes on you. For a young kid, it's a lot of pressure. I really hope, like you've got Steve Compton there. Steve Compton, like I said, he's an old head. You can get that old head and try to put it on these young guys. Try and impart that wisdom. Try to, get rid of those other thoughts, try and block out all that hype and just do the job you're in there to do. But I think sometimes it's hard when you have that type of breakout performance. You want to do that again. And sometimes the fight just doesn't allow it. Same as Steve's last fight. It just didn't allow him to do it. He did what he had to do to get that win. It wasn't the most exciting fight. It wasn't, it's not getting fight of the year, nothing like that. But he did what he had to. But from seeing his first fight, you look at that second fight and go, oh man, that wasn't like his first one. Even though you forget this guy's fighting the best guys in the world. He's fighting in the top end of the best guys in the world. And so sometimes it's hard to remember that. And I just hope Tom goes in there. He's got the talent. He's got the skills. He can do it. But I just hope he doesn't go in there wanting to entertain the crowd or wanting to impress Dana or wanting to do those things where he goes in there trying to get that highlight reel knockout. Because like most things, those knockouts just have to come. You can't force them. You can't make it happen. It has to be there at the right time. And if it's not, just win the fight. We just want you to win the fight. There's no one here to impress. When you get the gold strap and you win the lightweight title, we'll all be impressed. You know what I mean? So I really want him to get out there. I want him to have a fantastic performance. I'll be rooting for him, cheering for him, watching it. But it's just, that's my one little tiny concern is when you have such a great first performance and everyone will be watching, hey, we want to see another big knockout. And then you start trying to push it, trying to make it happen when it's not there.
I mean, hopefully he just sort of imposes his will in such a way that it kind of melts his opponent. I mean, his opponent, Nicholas Motta, has been knocked out a couple of times. So, maybe, now that we can root for Tom Nolan in an unbiased fashion because he's not fighting an Eternal MMA card anymore, we can thoroughly get behind him and push him to that win. I mean, I guess the good thing for Tom Nolan is, even though his career, up until this point, and I mean, he's only 5-0 in his career, a lot of knockouts on his record, but I mean, he's been through some adversity in terms of at least tough fights, fighting for Eternal MMA as well. I mean, his fight against Trevor Sinclair back at Eternal 63, I mean, that went to decision. Didn't finish that fight, but I mean, he did a lot of the right things to eventually get that win. Even the fight against Adam Cook at Eternal 72, I mean, he got the job done in round 2, but I mean, Adam Cook, no slouch. I mean, he pushed him and he did a lot of the right things, both in standing and both on the ground as well. So, hopefully, not going on with front. What's that? Sorry.
In his fight with Adrian boy, it's Kobe Potter.
For Tom Nolan.
Yeah, didn't he fight?
Kobe Porter. No, I don't think he fought Kobe. So his last fight for Eternal was against Aiden Aguilera. That one that he won with the knees and punches in round 1. But Kobe Porter, he's in Eternal. He fought Trevor Sinclair, won by decision, won against Niam Stephen at Eternal 67 in the first round. Adam Cook, round 2. Aiden Aguilera, round 1.
Huh. I don't know where I'm getting that mixed up. There you go.
But I mean, shout out Kobe Porter. He's another one of those guys when we talk about guys that have had a couple of wins and a couple. He's a great guy, man. Another guy who's in fantastic shape. Again, I know we're sort of segueing here, but I mean, you talk about those guys that could be 5-0 theoretically. I think if my memory serves me correctly, Kobe Porter's a guy that's maybe 3-2, 3-3. But I mean, just speaking to the level of these guys guys like Kobe Porter are fighting the talent that we've got here. And having to sort of grind out wins and not quite get the wins sort of early. It's just another testament to the big things we're doing down here in Australia.
Tom's had good fights. I mean, Motter, I think, is going to be surprised when the bell rings and he gets jabbed from the other side of the ring. That's the first time that you're fighting a 6'3" lightweight. Like, it's always, it's imposing. And yeah, look.
It's almost like that Indian guy from Street Fighter. Was he Dal Sim or whatever? That had the big, long, stretchy arms and stuff. It's kind of a bit of Tom Nolan right there.
It's a bit of that. So yeah, look, I really want Tom to win. Obviously, it'll be great for Tom to begin with. Get that sort of monkey off his back. Like, it's good to win the contender, but to win your fight in the contender series, but to get a legit UFC win in your column, it's sort of, like I said, get that monkey off your back, shake off some of those nerves. You're a UFC fighter now, and sort of, start making his way. So I think we're all hoping he wins, but yeah, they're just, I guess, a few of the things that I'm conscious of that I'm thinking of is that kind of
fair.
That kind of mentality when everybody's expecting it, because when they're hyping this fight, or when they're going to be doing media for this fight, when they put out clips for this fight, it's going to be Tom Nolan knocking that guy out. There's going to be 10 different angles of it because it's such a great knockout. And do you know what I mean? So everyone's going to probably ask him those questions, the media scrums, the lead-ups, are you going to knock Motter out? Do you think you'll knock him out? Do you think you'll finish it in the first round? A lot of that stuff, it gets in, starts playing those little games in your head. But again, very experienced coach. He's been around, and, I've got no doubt he'll sit him down and, hey, game plan, this is what we do. We just keep working the game plan. If the knockout comes, it comes. If it doesn't, we'll take home the W.
Let's see what happens there. But I mean, last time we saw a guy go into the contender series and get a big time knockout win, Jack Della Maddalena, of course, the last guy to do that from Australia, and then go and get his big debut win with a first round knockout too. So let's have our fingers crossed for Tom Nolan.
Did I see Jack's fighting Gilbert Burns?
Jack is fighting Gilbert Burns at UFC 299, I think it is. Like, that should be a fight that's on UFC 300. I was actually watching some interesting videos today about how much they're stacking up UFC 299, and maybe 300 potentially might end up being a bit of a dud. But we do have Jack Della Maddalena versus Gilbert fucking Burns, man. Like, holy shit. I mean, this is a test of all tests. This is where we really see where Jack's at for sure.
What a meteoric rise for him.
Yeah.
Like, he's literally gone inside a very short period of time from watching Gilbert Burns at home on Fight Pass, standing across the cage from Gilbert Burns. We're about to fight. It must be so surreal for Jack to sort of be in that position. Like, it's literally a few years ago. Turn on Fight Pass, watch Gilbert Burns. A few years later, fight Gilbert Burns. It's such a crazy...
It's very surreal.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I would have expected him to, I guess, he's talented, and I expected him to work his way through, but I didn't know it was going to go as quick as this. Like, this is a guy who fought Khamzat Chimaev all the way. A great fight. And Khamzat's an animal. And Gilbert Burns fought him all the way. Do you know what I mean?
That was a wild fight.
Who took on, like, the killer, the boogeyman, Khamzat Chimaev, and, matched him. Okay, he lost, but he didn't get beaten. He didn't get thrashed like a lot of these guys have.
No, God, no. No, he got his punches in, man, in that fight. Like, he had him rocked a couple of times. That was a close fight.
And now to have Jack in there fighting a guy of that caliber, for the UFC even to feel like, hey, Jack's ready, is such a testament to Jack. And again, like, I take it as a nod to Australian MMA. Hey, we're going to get Australian MMA guy, and we're going to put him up against the very best in the world. This guy is one of the best to do it in that division, and you're going to get a crack at him.
And I mean, there's a couple of things there too. I mean, it's quite a publicized, well-known story about, Jack sort of, starting MMA, going 0-2 in his first couple of fights and having that sit down with his coach, Ben Vickers, from Scrappy MMA, of course, one of the bosses for Eternal MMA, but saying, hey, we're going to go on our next 10 fights here and we're going to win our next fight. We're going to win our next 10 fights. We're going to go to the UFC. Ben's thoroughly convinced, and he said it from day one, that he believes Jack's going to be a champion. I mean, and this is the next stepping stone for that. So, what an absolute turnaround story for Jack. But, I mean, the other thing it does highlight too, I mean, this is something I've thought about over the last 12 months in terms of where Australia sort of sits in terms of, just pound for pound, the fighters that we have in the UFC, guys that we've sort of got in the top of the divisions, in their respective divisions, and that sort of thing. For such a small sort of populated country, for the guys we've had, champions like Rob Whittaker and that sort of thing, guys like Stephen Erceg in the top 15, guys like Jack Della Maddalena in the top 15, so many Australian guys, it's everything that we've got going on here in this country and what we're sort of putting out, what we're exporting over to UFC against, Americans, against the usual powerhouses like Brazil, we're coming, there's just more guys going to be coming down that pipeline. And some of the guys that we've talked about, guys like Quill and Soulkill coming through, obviously still a little while off, but I mean, it's going to be really exciting to sort of see what happens over the next couple of years, because the guys that are over there aren't going anywhere anytime soon, and there's going to be a lot of guys sort of following over. So it's going to be very interesting to see how many guys we've got making waves in the UFC and abroad over the next 12 months.
Yeah, and look, it's and the other thing too is I think a lot of the guys are starting to see there is a certain amount of urgency to fight, stay current, stay relevant. These big breaks, you see the big breaks that they have, that fighters have, it's actually fairly detrimental to them. Like, look at Colby Covington. That, it's easy to rag on people, but that was probably Colby's worst performance.
He shit the bed.
That was a but you have that long off. McGregor has that long off. All these guys have this time off outside the unicorn, which is John Jones, who I think could have 10 years off and come back and somehow win a fight. Like, the guy's but he's your outlier. He's your outlier, the unicorn, like I said. But these other guys are starting to realize, hey, we need to fight 3 times a year. You know what I mean? We need to get these fights in, and you're starting to see more guys in Eternal do that type of thing, get those 3 fights a year, 4 fights a year, fight as much as they can, as often as they can, not try to pad their record, not duck fights. Like I said, we're seeing the right fights at the right time. And a lot of these guys have got a little firecracker underneath them, because it's either now or never for some of those little bit older guys, because Dana said it before, hey, I'm not looking for mid-30-year-old guys to contract to the UFC. So, for some of these guys who are starting to push that, it's now or never. So you have to be in the ring. You have to be winning fights. For some of these younger guys, it's good, that consistency of fighting, building a base, building a record, building a career out of it that you can take into the UFC. I think, again, Cam's providing, a lot of shows. This year we've got Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, and, there's talk of other states coming on board. And again, that's just more fights, more shows, more eyes on, more opportunity to fight, more opportunities for Australian MMA. And the more you're in front of the screen, the more opportunity somebody has from one of these other organizations to see you and pick you up.
No, it's exciting times ahead, man. And I mean, it all starts, coming up in February. We've got that massive, like we said at the early part of the conversation, 4 title fights on that massive card for Eternal 82. The guys we talked about, Quill and Soulkill versus Don Marfan in that rematch for the lightweight title. Absolutely epic stuff there. But I mean, we got Rod Costa versus Alan Philpott. A little bit of a grudge match, a little bit of bad blood there. We're going to do a bit of a breakdown of this at some point. Well, not a breakdown, but we're going to look ahead of this card in a separate video, so stay tuned for that one. But a lot to look forward to there for Rod Costa versus Alan Philpott, which will be preceded by Anthony Drillich in his fight against Jake Hurl for his first defense of his flyweight title. Anthony Drillich, man, coming down through the flyweight division and carrying that power. That's going to be an absolute cracker to see. And of course, we've got Caleb Rideout versus Alden Bates for that welterweight title. I mean, you want to talk about an absolute car crash. I mean, for the fact that that's opening up a main card, or at least opening up a set of 4 title fights in the main card. I mean, what an absolute treat we're sort of getting there. And I mean, hats off to Eternal MMA, Cam O'Neill and the guys making the fights, because I mean, they've decided we're kicking off 2024 with a bang. Let's not rest on our laurels in 2023 with everything good we have there. Let's step into 2024 and give it an absolute crack. And when we get, moving on from that, we go straight into Eternal 83 with what you said before, with John Martin Fraser defending his title against Ben Johnston, Lockie Stitt versus Elliot Compton. So we're kicking off in the right way, man. So we're going to come back here and we're going to talk all about that. Love to get some predictions from you when we come back and talk about those videos. But, I mean, we're setting ourselves up right for 2024. Let's go.
Yeah, look, it's like I said right off the bat, cracker card to start the year. Well, 2 cracker cards to start the year. And look, if the rest of the year's cards can stay together and the things that Cam's got planned, I think it's an exciting year for Australian MMA in general, obviously for Eternal. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing some of these new faces come over. I said I'd give you a shout out, Oren Palmley from Gamebred. He's been fighting in IMAF. IMAF's had a few internal problems, let's say that, and they've gone the way of the dodo here in Australia, which if anyone wants to go back and look, I'm not gloating, but I may have had 3 years ago a conversation on Facebook with some of the people who were involved in IMAF. It may have got a little heated. They might have told me a few things. I'm just saying, where is it now? That's all I'm going to say is where is it now? But whatever, happened. I bumped into Oren Palmley at Seb Jaramello's black belt grading at Pound It. And I had a quick chat to him, and he was very open to the idea of coming over and fighting in Eternal. And so, Oren, here's your shout out. And he's a very, very talented kid. Him and his brother were both very good fighters. Kyle Crocodile Palmley, if you ever remember him from back in the day, he was certainly a talent, and his brother Oren's no different. So I'm hoping we see you on here, Oren. Here's a shout out I told you I was going to give you. So now the gauntlet's been thrown down. Let's see you at Eternal.
And Darryl, I've got to thank you for coming on the show once again, man. Talking about the big year that we have for 2023 and setting ourselves up for a big 2024. Let's do it again sometime soon, sometime very soon, because like we said, we've got that massive Eternal 82 card coming up. So we'll get back here. We'll get your thoughts on what you think is going on there. Maybe some predictions, some thoughts and feelings about what's going to transpire with some of those fights, and look ahead to that big Eternal 83 card as well. We'll do it all. We'll break it down. We'll see what's to come, and we'll see what comes out of those fights. Absolutely can't wait. Thank you once again for joining, man, and we will see you again very soon.
Thanks, man.